And so I'm going to assume that we are now live, because what happens is that Facebook seems to go a little earlier than expected. So I'm going to say hi to everybody. I hope some people will be able to join us on Facebook, but obviously we have a number of people here with us in the Zoom room as well, which is lovely to have you all here. So I'm here today with Adrienne. We're back. I know we haven't done one of these for a little while, but it seemed really appropriate because when we've talked, we've had a number of clients and that are really concerned about how it's going to be when we unlock, and the fact that people are still feeling some anxiety around that. You know, I know people that are raring to go and I can't wait to kind of just get back to complete normal. But then there are actually a lot of people that are wondering how it's going to be. How are we going to behave with each other? We've practiced these habits of being different with each other. So what's going to happen next? So really want to welcome Adrienne Kirk. Those of you that don't know Adrienne, she's a fantastic psychotherapist. We work together on different projects. We've got a big one in the offing, which is great. And she's my colleague, but also my friend. And yes, I'm going to hand over to you, Adrienne, to introduce yourself, because I think most people that will be watching this on my feed will know that I teach mindfulness. I might even change my name on here, but right, I'm going to shut up now and hand over.
Thanks, Lucy. So I'm Adrienne Kirk. I'm a psychotherapist and I specialise in grief and loss. And there's been a lot of loss in terms of both bereavement and also loss of the lives that we had previously over the COVID situation. And I'm like Lucy, I'm finding that lots of my clients sort of fall into those categories of people who can't wait to jump back into their old lives, and people who, you know, who are still really debating with themselves when it is that they might do a supermarket shop themselves, if ever again, and whether they will ever stop washing everything that comes in the supermarket shop before they put it in the fridge, and whether that's a, you know, that's now something that is part of their lives. And this huge spectrum between that of what people feel and their anxiety about other people's differences of opinions.
Yeah, and that's been something that's been huge, hasn't it? We've spoken about that before, that people don't feel the same as I do. Why not? Why can't other people see this like I am? I'm feeling like this, yet you're behaving in this way. And that's really sort of challenging. And yeah, but I think when we were speaking about this before, there's this understanding that actually some of the habits that we've got into might be quite sensible. I quite like that the teenagers walk in from school and immediately wash their hands. I mean, it's the sort of thing I would have done anyway. They definitely wouldn't. But because of this, they've kind of got into the habit. That's not a bad habit to keep, is it?
Absolutely, and that's the thing, isn't it? That there's never, it's never all bad or all good, right? So and how we negotiate that, how we hold on to the things that we think are useful, and really think about the things that maybe we don't want to hold on to. And it is that, it's exactly that, isn't it? It's the thinking about it. So I think we get those sedimented beliefs, you know, that nothing is safe and that we have to protect ourselves against everything for some people,
Yeah.
and the other end, that none of this is really real, and why aren't we just out in the world, right? So there's all sorts of positions between those two, and being really conscious of the choices we're making and how we maybe change those as we as the roadmap, is that what we're calling it now,
Yeah.
as the roadmap unfolds.
Yeah. And who's right?
Yeah.
You know, that I don't know if anyone else that's here feels that same thing, but there's been so much feeling of I'm right,
Mm.
because we only know our own map of reality that's created from everything we've experienced. Yeah, that's our version of what's real, and therefore our opinion feels like it's the correct one because it fits with our narrative of life and how things are. And that's why I think when we spoke earlier, I'm throwing the word in for you now, but the cognitive dissonance that arises between kind of how can people behave like that? That isn't right. My way is right. And then on this whole spectrum, how we work out what those things are that are kind of
Mm-hmm.
habits to keep and which ones actually might be unhelpful or cause us more anxiety or
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that for lots of people, the cognitive dissonance exists in themselves, so they're holding two contradictory views, right?
Right.
That on the one hand, these things are helping keep them safe, but on the other hand, they really want to be out in the world, and then that leaves us. Human brains are not designed to hold two contradictory thoughts simultaneously. Everything about our being rejects that. So then
Yeah.
that leaves us in that position of feeling that neither position is right, so neither felt right. So either I stayed in and now I feel like I'm missing out, or I went out and that felt quite scary. And how do you kind of bridge that and bring those two views together?
Yeah, how indeed. And hopefully we'll kind of, explore that a little bit more in this session to try and give some people some steers towards what, how they might go about working out what is okay.
Yeah.
Because I think it so one of the things I said to you when we spoke the other day was, for me, I've got this feeling, although I've got these concerns and worries as much as everyone else, it still feels weird if I said that, next time, or because a date has changed, I can now hug you, you know. I think there will still be something in me that, is this okay? Is it not? And I'm trusting that because I've practiced hugging people and being in contact with people, shaking hands, doing stuff for all of the years prior to lockdown, that there will be a kind of neural pathway in my mind that knows that this is okay. And that
Yes.
although we've formed new habits over this past year, that's only a short period of time
Mm,
in comparison to the number of years I was practicing the other way. So I'm
absolutely.
hoping that I will fall back into the old habits quite easily.
And I think
Um,
that will, there's also all of those social cues for that as well, right? So once we are going back into spaces where we're meeting people and those things were normal, then we tend to unthinkingly do whatever we did in those situations.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those neural pathways are there and are quickly reactivated. And I think the difficulty comes for people who are not wanting to do that, and so are having to sort of consciously go, oh no, I don't want to
Mm.
do that. And then there's this sort of social dance that happens, which there've always been people who are much more tactile than others, right? And then there's that kind of, are we shaking hands, are we hugging, are we, so that appears in prior to COVID, and
I'm
I think it will be more so.
yeah, I'm laughing because I once saw two members of my family that were completely unrelated. So it was, an in-law and a step parent kind of doing the kiss hello, and ended up doing that and ended up kissing each other on the lips. And it was one of those like moments of, both of them felt so awkward. So yeah, there is always that, what's right, where should we
Yeah.
go? I mean, even when I was working in media for many years, lots of I was in media for 25 years. And in part of our sort of meeting, our rep training, our presentation training, I would say to people, media is a very kissy business, right? It'd be interesting to see what happens in media, but you go to ad agencies and stuff, everyone kisses everybody, and it's usually more than one. So I would actually say to people, what you want to do instead of having the silly dance is actually just take someone's shoulders and you guide them. You kind of steer it, and it works if you take control over it rather than going, I don't know which way to go first. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but it's quite interesting that
Mm.
actually maybe there's something in that where we need to actually say, what's okay here? Are you happy to shake hands? Should we have a hug? Can we kiss? And check with the other person's boundaries,
Yeah.
because actually people in media did not check with boundaries, and some people did not like kissing everybody anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And then and
um,
then it's difficult, isn't it? And that introduces that level of awkwardness. But yeah, I'm a big advocate of making your thinking explicit. And and
yeah.
and and I think that certainly, whilst we're transitioning into whatever is the new normal that we're all comfortable with, that we have to, be brave and sort of own what we're comfortable with, and that means we have to have thought about it, right? Because otherwise we arrive in those situations and then go, oh, do you know what, I don't think I am comfortable with that. and
Yeah.
that introduces that level of awkwardness as well.
So it sounds like this explicit, I can't remember the words you use, but explicitly sort of expressing what's okay, or asking or checking, as a useful strategy. But for me, and what I've been talking to my clients about, and I don't know, I'm sure you'll agree, but I don't know if you've got more to add to it, I'm sure you will have, is about not waiting until June the 25th or whatever it is to suddenly decide, all boundaries dropped, like let's just pretend like nothing ever happened. And of course we will be led by government guidelines. They might still say, look, we've got no actual restrictions to go into the pub or whatever, but keep sensible, keep distance, maybe still wear masks in very enclosed places. I don't know. We don't know what that's going to look like. But it strikes me that one of the most helpful things we can do is to start using the government's roadmap of what's okay to ease ourselves back into normality, to find out where our own boundaries are and where our own stress points might be, so that we can start to work with them.
Absolutely, and I think that's so important, because until we start to do something, we're not actually going to know how comfortable we feel doing it, right? So we can think about it all we like, but but our physiological responses to being in those situations might actually be quite different. And if you are thinking, oh, I'd quite like to get back out in the world, well, from Monday, being able to meet other people outdoors is a way of stepping into that. And we've you and I have talked a lot about a kind of a window of tolerance, right? So what feels comfortable, and if this is your window of tolerance, if where you'd like to get to is kind of here, you don't leap to there because that's really uncomfortable. But it's about kind of edging there and trying it out and seeing how that feels. And and just because it's awkward or difficult the first time, I think kind of reflecting on that and thinking, and was there anything else? Was there also enjoyment and excitement, and did that feeling subside over the time we were together, and what else did I get out of it?
Yeah.
And then thinking about, so what would be the next little step?
Awareness sounds to be an important
Yeah,
factor here, like knowing what you're
always.
feeling as you're feeling it. So it strikes me that there's a number of things we've talked about that could be shoehorned in here. Presumably the people we're going to start meeting over the next week or so, they're going to be friends, people we love, people we really want to see, most likely. So we can be quite honest with them about our feelings. If we're feeling a little anxious or stressed, or still want to keep quite a lot of distance, or even wear a mask even though we're outside or whatever, then being really honest, saying, look, I'm still carrying a bit of stress or a bit of worry about things. I know lots of people that are shielding because of their health, and some people that haven't even been out for the whole year, like barely set foot outside the house. And that's got to be a really scary place to suddenly then have 5 people in your garden or whatever. So maybe you start with one and then two, and literally building up, and also being
Absolutely.
quite honest about what that looks like in terms of, for you, how you're feeling about it,
Yeah.
and bringing real awareness to what's happening as it's happening. So I can feel my heart is racing a bit just by even being in other people's company. How does that feel? And not going into the kind of, it's easier said than done, but I know, it's easy when you think you know what you're doing, but not kind of immediately going, a horrible sensation is here of fear and whatever, so therefore I need to flee, I need to send you all home.
Yeah.
Just seeing if perhaps there's the possibility of, like you say, just staying with it, like being open to it and exploring it, recognizing it for exactly what it is, kind of having that perspective to say, well, they are still 2 meters away from me. This is, we know from the guidelines, this is within safe parameters, etc. And seeing if we don't just immediately push it away, but can actually, we always joke about kind of rolling out the welcome mat for difficult, uncomfortable feelings, but it can be challenging. But but it's the way to explore this window of tolerance and to increase it, right?
Absolutely, and to try and remember that feelings are here, but they're not they're not us, right? They come from us, but they aren't us, and that we have a level of control over how we respond to them. Okay, we feel what we feel, right, and they come up, but what we do with that is something that we have control over. So being able to, and as you say, it's so much easier to say it than actually do it, but
Yeah.
being, thinking about, okay, so that's here, and what else is here, and how comfortable do I feel with that, and how long can I bear that for, and if I say it, if I say, oh gosh, I hadn't realized I'd feel quite this anxious, what would that be like?
Mm.
Because although these are the people we're going to be seeing are our friends and family and the people we love the most, there is that also brings a level of anxiety of, what if they don't feel what I'm feeling? What if it's, what if they think I'm being silly? Or,
Mm.
what if, what if we've disagreed about COVID all along, and now we're sort of trying to get back to normal? So I think those feelings also come up, and being aware of those is really important.
Yeah, I really concur with this whole idea of saying, oh, anxiety's here, rather than I'm really anxious,
Yeah.
that it is a separate thing, that our experience is made up of just body sensations, thoughts, the feelings. That's what our experience is. And if we can get that slight distance from it, it's what we practice, in mindfulness, is to be able to step back, to get a bit of perspective on what's here. But I absolutely think what you've just said is so valid about that actually even the people we love may not agree. They may feel differently. They may have judgments, albeit they're maybe born out of kindness, oh, don't be silly, stop worrying.
Yeah.
And for people that are worriers, it's like as if I haven't thought of that. It's not enjoyable to sit in this state of stress. If only I just thought about stopping it. I'm always joking about that in my teaching, that
Yeah.
it's not a switch we can just turn on and off. We do actually have to practice how we manage our emotions. It is a practice, and if the way we manage our emotions currently isn't helpful and can cause us unhappiness and stress and exacerbate the situation, then we do have to practice the other way, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's really hard, right? It's really hard not to get defensive about, this is my view, this is my story, right? That this is dangerous, and if you don't understand that, then I don't really understand you, and and then we get kind of entrenched, and it's hard to sort of step back from that and say, yes, this is my story, this is how I'm viewing the world, but that makes it my story, right? Rather than that makes it true. And it doesn't even make it true for me. It just means that's what I'm thinking at the moment.
Gosh, yeah.
How is that serving me? And is there something else? Is there something different I can think about that?
Yeah. And one of the other things we were talking about is about relationships, and how
Mm-hmm.
as human beings we are so, well, I used an example again when we spoke the other day about, sometimes I don't even know what kind of mood I'm in until I have contact with another human being, and then I suddenly think, oh, I'm a bit grumpy today, or almost like we are defined by how we are in relation to other people. I think you phrased it much
Yeah,
better.
we're relational beings. I think we exist in relation with others, and it's really hard to not have been in that situation. And that means that in order to manage that, I think lots of us have had to kind of close off part of ourselves, in order to cope with the not seeing people, because otherwise it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know someone whose view now is, she's been shielding for the whole year because her husband is at risk, and her view now is, short of getting a haircut and seeing me, everything else feels dangerous, and that's
Oh.
her word. It's dangerous. The world is now dangerous, and that's terrible. That's the position, that she feels that she's in.
Mm. But thank goodness for neuroplasticity, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All of those what seem fixed beliefs can be changed with
Yeah.
a little bit of practice, a little bit of work, some unpicking, and obviously that's what we do, isn't it? That's what we help people to do. Yeah, it's so interesting to really take that wider view and think, how different. So many people's perspectives on this have been, are currently, will be. You know, I'm sure we'll see some weirdness come out, you know, like at the initial stages of toilet roll hoarding, and then, you know, denial and anti-masking people, and you know, anti-vaxxers, and, you know, the whole different kind of polar opposite views that go on. I'm sure there's going to be some new thing that we haven't even thought of yet that comes up that causes this sort of friction between people that, you know, once, because it's good friends that are having these polar opposite views, and it's really put lots of strain, I think, on many relationships.
Yeah, it really has, and I'm certainly seeing that in my consulting room, with clients coming along. And one of the things that I specialize in is relationship breakdowns, and most often, obviously, those are romantic relationships. But actually, at the moment, there's a lot of sort of other family members or friends relationships, and feeling like this for me is such a fundamental thing. And if we disagree on this, then what does that mean for? Does that make a mockery of our friendship? You know, is it based on nothing? You know, I thought we were alike, and you know, getting people to row back from those positions and think about, you know, what is there that keeps them together? What is, you know, is this, and it might be, is this something that is a deal breaker?
And it actually might be, mightn't it? That's the frightening thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that needs to be thought about, right? That needs to be a considered choice, rather
not a
than
knee-jerk reaction.
Absolutely, rather than it just falling apart, and then you know, 6 months down the line, when everybody's feeling it all feels a bit more normal again, whatever the situation is, you know, thinking, oh, actually, I wish we hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't lost that. I wish we'd worked a bit harder at that.
Yeah, and I suppose it's worth a quick sort of revisit that over what happens when we're stressed, that we do lose that rational part of our brain that can think clearly and step back to look at a situation more objectively. So when we're right in the midst of, you know, let's say an argument with a friend or a family member or whatever, even if I don't actually even mean the verbal argument, but I mean the situation as a whole, emotions get provoked, the stress response system, the threat response systems gets activated, and physiologically our brain goes offline, right? Our human rational brain goes offline,
turns off our frontal cortex, and then, you know, and then we don't have that overview. We don't have that part of us going, am I being reasonable here? Is this okay? Do I want to pull? Oh, should I say that? and we just let go.
Yeah, so again, it's about that ability to bring the prefrontal cortex back online. So I'm doing the Dan Siegel model there. You can see that.
I was as well.
Yeah,
just out of shot.
If anyone wants to know what that is, Google Dan Siegel brain flipping your lid. Yeah. So yeah, we need strategies to bring that online. I mean, again, mindfulness is one of those strategies that is designed specifically to help to bring our prefrontal cortex back online. Designed isn't really the word, but it has been proven to enable us to do it quickly. Stephen Covey, is it Stephen Covey? Someone said it's a 90-second weather pattern, you know, that you can, that the stress response system can be in and out within 90 seconds. But we often it goes on much longer than that, doesn't it? Because we feed it with thoughts and everything else.
Absolutely.
But if we're aware that it's here and we can name it and sort of hold it and go, I see what's happening here, my stress response system is kicking in, then we might just be able to do something that will bring that prefrontal cortex back online.
And I think having a plan for that as well. So, you know, in the household, do I need to, when I feel that happening to myself, do I need to move away? So I just take myself out the room and breathe, and then we can come back, you know. So it's about noticing that it's about to happen, and it's about what you do then in that pause. And it might not be to be reasonable immediately to that person, because they might not have noticed it as well, but it might be a little bit of distance and then come back and then continue.
Yeah, and actually at the end of this talk today, I'm going to talk people through a stop practice, which is exactly that. So thanks, you teed that up perfectly. We'll segue into that shortly. So I'm really interested in now of, okay, so, you know, let's get really practical on the sort of steps. So a couple that we've discussed are being quite honest with how we're feeling to ourselves, and if it feels okay, to others as well, being quite explicit about what's happening, using the roadmap to kind of help to ease ourselves back in. So we're looking at sort of step by step what happens, how can we introduce a little bit more, because as you said, like you don't want, whenever we're exploring the difficult in a mindfulness course, firstly we don't even start that till we've done at least 4 weeks of practice, and then even in week 5 we don't rip the lid off the worst possible things. We peek very gently at what might be challenging, and then, you know, maybe it's possible to explore, but we do it a little bit at a time. And the words use a pendulation. You go and look at it, and if you can't, if it feels too difficult, you come away again. So that's kind of what we want to do, isn't it? Try it. As soon as it feels too out of control, moving away, but actually knowing where your edge is. Is it a genuine edge, or is it just a sort of an immediate sort of reaction to it that we probably could stay with a little bit longer? And you know, it's a bit like with exercise or something. When you try and stretch, you get to a point and you think, oh, I've gone a bit too far, but you can always come back that little bit, you know, or even stop completely. And there's always that sort of freedom to play with that. And I think
I love that analogy.
important.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's also something about some of these situations are going to be out of our control, right? So some people's workplaces will open up and they will be expecting people to come back, and their staff will have to use public transport, be in a building with other people. So there's also something about really being aware of what is within my control and what isn't. And what is in your control in those situations is, you know, are there things you can do that make you feel more comfortable doing that? So keeping your mask on and choosing times to travel that mean that it's going to be less busy, and maybe negotiating some working at home days if that's possible. So really being aware of, because it's really easy in those situations to go, that's all out of my control and now it's just horrible. You know, so being really mindful about where you might have some control, even in situations that are being imposed upon you.
I think that's really useful. And I think having the courage to kind of have the discussions with bosses, I think that there will be much more hopefully openness to having those more difficult conversations. You know, people aren't mind readers. They won't know if we're really super stressed about going back to work unless we tell them, particularly if they don't experience any anxiety around it. They'll think everyone else feels as they do, so why wouldn't you just pop back to work, you know?
Absolutely.
So there's really something in, and it might feel challenging, and you might think, oh my goodness, my, you know, job might be under threat or something. But actually, if work is just going to be utterly unbearable and miserable as without that conversation, then it's worth it, isn't it? It really is. And I really feel that most HR departments will have to be, you know, I've got my HR hat on now, they'll have to be reasonable, because if they don't, there'll be massive backlash, you know, against not taking care of the well-being of employees. And, you know, if something good has come out of COVID, it might be that people do get more flexibility. They might not have to work full-time, commuting every day. There might be stuff like that actually, you know, I worked in a company that said you cannot work from home, it doesn't work. Well, that company probably has had to deal with that this year, otherwise they would have gone under. And I really hope for all those people that begged for part-time working that they get it, you know, or not even part-time, but, you know, flexible working from home.
And certainly I've got clients who are in exactly that situation, you know, that there was no way that was possible in their industry, and all of a sudden they have all worked at home. You know, so might be possible then, at least some of the time. So I think having those conversations is really important.
And also then what you said about what we can control leads us to the thing we probably say most often in these talks, is that the one thing we have agency and control over is our own response to any given situation. It's often the only thing actually that we do have full choice over, albeit it may not feel like it. It may feel like we're sort of reacting in a knee-jerk way. If we can learn to manage our emotions more skillfully, then we have this power to keep ourselves okay. And I'm imagining that there will be lots of feeling like, this other people are wrong thing that will get us frustrated and annoyed and stressed and really cause us lots of unhappiness when people aren't behaving in our view of how they should be. And we've got to let that go, right?
Yeah,
We've got
absolutely.
to,
Let that go. We have to recognize that push pull that we feel, that sometimes it feels okay and sometimes it doesn't, and sort of what's going on there. And as you say, just letting go of what we believe that must be true, and everybody must be convinced.
yeah, no amount of sort of tutting or rolling eyeballs or whatever. If someone has their own fixed view of how things should be, they're just going to do it, right? And so it's coming back to, what can I do to keep myself safe, to allow myself to feel less stressed about this situation? And like you say, that may be we keep our mask on, we keep more of a distance, we have to cross the road because the person this side isn't being reasonable, or whatever works for us. But those things we can do. We don't have to just stay next to the person that isn't keeping distance and get cross with them and roll our eyes at them. It's we're never going to change other people.
No, no, absolutely. And that's, I think that's such a fundamental important thing for us all to learn, right? The number of clients I see who arrive, and when we talk about what it is they'd like to get out of sessions, it's to change, they'd like to know how to change their partner to make this work better, or change their workplace, change their boss. And of course we can't do that. What we can do is change our side of the interaction, right? So we can change the way in which we engage, and that might change the situation, but you're not changing somebody else's point of view, not
Yeah,
unless they're open to that.
no, and you're right. And this is exactly what someone's just popped in the chat. I made my choice to wear a mask around school where I occasionally teach music. The kids got used to it immediately. And now visiting PE teachers feel confident enough to wear their masks too. So this has changed someone else's behavior, not because they were doing something wrong, but actually because they now feel like I'm not alone.
Yeah,
And
it's
other people
empowered other
feel like
people.
me. And it's
Yeah,
given that empowerment to other people. That's amazing.
that's brilliant.
Yeah, especially when you're not in a teaching bubble. I think that's super
Mm.
important. So
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly the kind of thing where we have to dig deep into our own sense of, other people might judge us, other people might think we're stupid or being over cautious or whatever, but I don't care. This is what will make me feel safe. It's what I'm happy doing. And it doesn't actually affect anyone else, but it does affect me massively because it
Yeah,
makes me feel safe. So it's, yeah, thank you for sharing that, because
absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
really, really useful.
That is great, isn't it? And even if somebody else is judging you, that's not about you. That's their story. Okay, that's their thing, and it's hard to do. It's hard to kind of make that shift, because we're relational beings. We're very sensitive to how other people uh,
You us.
view us,
Yeah.
and that affects how we feel about ourselves. But if we can kind of turn that around and say, oh, okay, so that's something about them, that's their story,
I
that's
think
it,
that
it's not about me.
I think that's one of the hardest things
Mm-hmm.
I've had to get my head round, when someone has expressed a viewpoint about me that's almost felt like, oh my God, I've done something wrong, or I've, you know, and it hurts. And I felt really sad. And, as much as people say to you, but it's their version of events, it's their story, something in you, perhaps not everybody, but particularly if you can be self-critical, something
Yes.
in you wants to be, is because you're a terrible person, or this proves everything I've been telling you all along. and
Oh yeah.
and that,
Overcoming that voice is really hard. It
yeah,
takes huge practice, right?
but it's so liberating to think,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's the story you're telling yourself. And if I can really look at my behavior, or what I've done, or what I'm doing, and think, this is harmless, or this didn't really or shouldn't really have affected you, then just maybe we'll be able to let that go, and let them say, and tell ourselves it is their narrative, it's their right to have it, their viewpoint, but it doesn't mean that it's truth.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to be able to look at the situation and say, am I comfortable with what I did? Was I being an idiot here? Or am I okay with how I conducted myself? And if I am, then how that's been viewed by someone else is about them.
And that brings me back to that point we made right at the beginning, because I think there's also something in this that perhaps we didn't finish addressing, which is, how do we tell if the behavior we want to take is proportionate, reasonable, or if we're actually can't even see that the way in which we're behaving is a bit unreasonable or disproportionate? And because actually when it's happening to us, and our prefrontal cortex is offline, and we're swept up in the middle of that emotional reaction, sometimes we might not know.
No.
Do you have any tips on how we can think, is this proportionate? Am I overreacting?
Yeah, and that comes back to something that we've said in other situations, which is, at that moment we probably can't, because we're our prefrontal cortex is already offline, and we're already in that heightened state. So I think reflecting on it afterwards is helpful, and then to keep doing that. And then what we're doing is we're catching ourselves earlier and earlier, so that we're recognizing, it's all about recognizing what that feels like in my body, right? So to get to the point where I'm recognizing that I'm about to have that reaction, and then think, is that am I being reasonable? Is it okay that somebody else is in the bread shop with me? Yeah, no, actually, it probably is. They're quite a long way away. It'll be okay. Or what? I don't know why that was my example, but anyway,
That's a good one. But yeah, you're right, aren't you? Because if you can feel that knot in your stomach, or whatever people's signature feeling might be for anxiety, for example, that's what I get, a kind of churning. The more you practice noticing what happens to you in these situations, the more you can recognize it as arriving, the more you might have the opportunity to say, that feeling of anxiety is here. I feel an impulse to run or to punch them or whatever it might be. Let's hope it's not the latter. But do I need to?
Yeah.
Is that the response? But you're right. Initially, we might not. We might just react and then reflect back.
Yeah.
But it's important to reflect back, but
Always.
without judgment, right?
Yes,
It's not a right or
absolutely.
wrong. You
No.
shouldn't have done it, or you should have behaved in this way. It has to be, this is what happened. Am I comfortable with that? Would I do it differently maybe next time? Learn from it, let it go, move on, and just maybe set an intention rather than a strivey goal. Just
Absolutely.
maybe next time we might go, here's that feeling again. I know this.
Yeah, absolutely. Did it serve me? And if not entirely, then what might I do differently? And I think it's really important to really get to understand these feelings that we have, because some of them are really similar, right? So the butterflies of excitement can feel quite similar to the churning of anxiety for some people, right? So being able to differentiate between those as they're starting is difficult. So it's an ongoing process, I think, to really understand exactly what we're feeling. And generally we're not only feeling one thing, so what else is here?
I was just
What's
about to say,
overlying that?
your example that you gave made me think about, I'm just about to walk out on stage. Both of those things are here, like excitement, I'm going to go out on stage, and absolute fear of supposing I mess it up, supposing it goes wrong, supposing. So yeah, those two things are held like that at the same time, but I'm still going to go out anyway. So it must be that the excitement bit is sort of winning, and if I can tune into that and go with that sort of rush of adrenaline that feels positive, rather than focus on the fear bit, I can maybe let that go and think, right, let's do this. If anybody has not watched the Power Poses TED Talk about kind of changing your posture to feel more, or to cope with those difficult anxieties or stresses that bring us in. Imagine when we come out on stage, Linda's here too, standing here, that's what I do in the wings to try and bring myself into that state of, it's okay. Yeah, I can do this.
I used to do it before I went into a lecture theatre. Normally my teaching was small groups, and occasionally a big lecture theatre of sort of 300 students, and I do this before I went in, and it's really energizing. Amazing. And energy to the tips of your fingers, and kind of prepares you. I think it's amazing the changes we can make to our emotional state with our bodies.
Yeah, and actually maybe that's what we need to do before we go in the garden with 5 people. you know, if we're feeling that
Yeah.
closed downness and the smallness that stress brings with us, the narrowness, that when we're stressed, it feels like things are closing in. Actually, just looking up at the sky and, you know, opening out to the trees and whatever, it has a physiological effect on the body. This is not us making this up. Anyone watching? This is science. No, but the TED Talk is worth it because they explain it beautifully in a scientific way, which I am not currently doing, but this is it in action.
Absolutely, and that does help us also to know what our space is. Okay, what our personal space is. So it would serve two purposes in that sort of situation of going into an environment with others.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was just looking at the Facebook live to see if there were any comments on the chat there. We'll come back to those perhaps in a moment. I got distracted there, didn't I? So have we covered, do you think, the points that will be helpful in terms of how we might ease ourselves back in if we are feeling fearful?
I hope so, and I do just want to reiterate, you know, that our old habits are strong, and so those things that we want to go back to, they they will happen. You know, that if that's what we want, then they're still there, and we can work towards them, and it always it's about doing what feels comfortable, and then maybe a tiptoe further and seeing how that feels, and knowing that it will, that even if it's uncomfortable at the first moment, it might not stay uncomfortable, so kind of staying with it and seeing and then increasing a bit again.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important. It makes me think about hugging people. It's just such a weird thing, but we need hugs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oxytocin. 20 seconds apparently you have to hug your children for. That's what they say. That's why Sasha stands there like that. But no, it has to be 20 seconds. Oh my God. Imagine when he's older and he watches all these videos where I talked about his teenagerness. Right. So I wanted to share, to finish with, if it's okay, just this short practice that we can do. It's one that we teach in the course, but it's, as Adrienne was saying, it's this opportunity to take a pause. It's called stop for a reason because it's a mnemonic that stands for things, but that's what we're doing. We're almost kind of turning the phone off and on again because it's crashed or whatever. You know, our brain's got too many tabs open and we just might need to get some clarity on the situation. So the S stands for stop, actually. Stop and just notice what's here. I'll guide a really short one in a moment, but I'll just talk through it. So the first thing is to stop, and you bring awareness not to what we're thinking about, dropping out of the thoughts, into the body, what's here. So it might be heart's racing, stomach's churning, there's tension in the body, and we're not trying to fix it or change it or see it as wrong. It's just a simple present moment awareness of that's what's here right now. And then once we've brought this kind of, and it's a real sense of allowing it to be there. Our tendency, as we spoke about, is to kind of push away what feels difficult, try and get rid. That's why we run away or, you know, get caught up. So it's a sort of observer stance to, look at all these sensations that are happening in my body right now. And then once we've brought awareness to what's going on, we narrow the focus of awareness to a particular point in the body. We call it an anchor, somewhere that can connect us to the present moment. So just to the breath can be helpful, but if we're in the middle of a panic attack, a breath might not be the most helpful place. So going maybe to the feet on the floor, or if we're sitting, the bottom on the chair might be a more supportive place. But what we're doing is really bringing curiosity and interest to those sensations in this particular moment. What's happening as I breathe in and breathe out? What does it feel like? Because if we are focused on something in the present moment, we can't also be having fearful thoughts of the past and the future and the what ifs and the shoulda couldas and everywhere else. It's a bit like if you read a book, if your focus is on the words, you can't also be thinking or having a conversation. So we're narrowing the focus. Then when we spend a little while there, broadening out again, noticing again what's here. And it may be that those sensations are still all here. We may still have racing heart and churny stomach, but perhaps by giving ourselves this pause, we've got an opportunity to ask ourselves, what would be helpful right now? what's needed. And that bit of perspective might be, as Adrienne earlier said, I need to remove myself from this situation. I need to just calmly walk out of the room and not engage in this, I don't know, conflict or whatever might be going on. Or actually, it might be, as Adrienne said, actually, it's not as bad as I thought. I can actually deal with this. My initial reaction was that I'm in a bit of a tears, but now I've taken these few moments, the sensations are there, but I can stay with them, and they seem to be subsiding a little bit, perhaps. And the longer we stay with them, perhaps the grip of the fear might just lessen. So that's the P. I haven't said so. Opening out, the P is proceed. How best can I proceed? So I didn't really use the mnemonic, did I? Stop, take a breath, or it could be feet on the floor or something. Open out again, and then how best can we proceed is the P. What next? So shall I guide one? I'll just make it a few minutes, because it can be something we can do. We don't need a mindfulness teacher to be guiding it. It's something that we can do on our own. And those that are with us, please feel free to take part if you want to. And literally just where we are now, we might want to close our eyes. It might give us a better reflection internally of what's going on. But let's just take a pause, a stop, and notice what's with us right now. And we may notice there's lots of thinking around, lots of thoughts present. So let's really drop into the body and notice what's here. And of course, there may not be much there. That's okay. We may have particular sensations we can really notice that are happening. Non-judgmental awareness of what's here. Just allowing things to be as they are. And then we're going to narrow the focus of awareness to a particular point in the body now. So choosing, is it the breath that I can tune my attention into, or would the feet or the hands, the seat be more supportive, more helpful? So wherever it is that we're paying attention, really having a sense of moving in close to those sensations. What can we feel? Maybe cool air at the nose, or the movement of the rise and fall of the ribs. Perhaps there's points of contact, tingling. And of course, the mind might wander to what's happened or what's happening. And that's okay. We're just guiding the attention back here to this narrower point of awareness. And come back firmly but kindly back to this moment. And then starting when we're ready to broaden out the awareness again. Just checking once more what's here in the body, how things are. And of course, they may just be as they were before, and that's okay. We're not trying to have fixed anything, simply bringing awareness to our feelings, our sensations in this moment. And with this awareness, perhaps just dropping in that question. What's needed right now? What would be helpful? And giving ourselves the space to really allow that question to resonate. We don't need to go hunting for the answer with our minds. It's a real sensing into what's needed in this moment. And then choosing when we're ready to open the eyes if they've been closed. And just take a moment before we come back together. Now, I'd normally ring a bell, but because I really want to encourage people to do this as a personal, check-in whenever they need to. We almost don't want to have the bell. It's not a needed thing. This can be a practice that we do several times throughout the day. Anyway, I would encourage people to do it just to check, what is my state? How am I? What is needed? But particularly in those moments when we notice we're having a bit of, I don't know, crisis, for want of a better word, that we can go to something like this. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. It's something that I've started doing since we've been working together, and I find it a really useful way of sort of marshalling, my emotions, what's going on, my awareness.
Yeah, and the more we do it, even when we feel okay, the more habitual it becomes, so that when we do need it in a time of difficulty, it's like a practice we've got up our sleeve. It feels like a habit. It's something that we do. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. So there aren't any questions on the Facebook group, but if anybody has any here that they want to pop into chat, please feel free.
And anybody watching back on replay, then tag it replay and put in any questions, and we will get back with some stuff. It'd be lovely to know that people have found it interesting or useful, or have other questions, have other things that they wanted to know. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that, because that's really important, that people might be watching this on replay and may have questions for us. So, like, where can they find us? So, yeah, is there a place that you direct people to, Adrienne, to find you?
So the two places really. One would be my website, so I can be contacted through my website, which is my name. So Adrienne Kirk .uk is my website, and I can be found on Facebook as well. So that those would be the most sensible ways to get hold of me. And if these sorts of conversations can trigger things in people, so if it has triggered something in you and you feel like you want to reach out, then either of us, I think, would be open to people kind of getting in contact, and just private messaging via Facebook would be
perfect.
Would be fine. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And for those that aren't perhaps members of the community mindfulness group, please, feel free to head on over. It's Mindfulness Community Presence of Mind. When we do things like this, they're always flagged in there, so keep up to date with the latest goings on. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Adrienne, and everyone that's joined us either on Facebook or here in the room. And I'm going to stop the Facebook feed. Thank you.
Thank you.